I'm going to tell you about something that happened this week that 99% of the media coverage completely missed. They showed you a Twitter fight. They showed you Trump calling one of his most loyal allies a traitor. They showed you Marjorie Taylor Greene firing back with screenshots of private text messages. But what they didn't show you, what they couldn't show you without understanding systems, power dynamics, and how political parties actually fracture, is that this moment represents something much bigger than two politicians having a disagreement. This is the beginning of the end of Republican Party unity, as we've known it for the past decade. And I need to explain to you exactly why that is happening, because the window for understanding this is closing fast. Think about this, like a rocket system. When you are launching, every component needs to be aligned. The boosters, the main engine, the guidance system, they all have to fire in the same direction, or the mission fails catastrophically. For nearly 10 years, Donald Trump has been the main engine of the Republican Party, everything aligned around him. Loyalty to Trump meant political survival. Crossing Trump meant political death. That was the system. That was the rule everyone understood. But what happened this week with Marjorie Taylor Greene? It is like the boosters decided to fire in a different direction mid-flight. And once that happens, you don't have a coordinated mission anymore. You have chaos. You have pieces separating. You have a system breaking down in real time. And here is what makes this even more significant. This wasn't some moderate Republican, some establishment figure who Trump never really trusted. Anyway, this was Marjorie Taylor Greene, one of his most vocal defenders, someone who campaigned for him relentlessly, someone who spent her own money supporting his election, someone who defended him on every major network when others stayed silent. If the system can break down with someone like that, it can break down with anyone. And I think that is exactly what we're watching happen. Let me take you back to where this cracked open, because context matters enormously here. Picture this. You are on Air Force One. Reporters are on board. The president is talking about his schedule, his priorities, the wins his administration is racking up. Then someone asks about Marjorie Taylor Greene, and Trump's answer wasn't just critical, it was brutal. He said she is not aligned with his thinking anymore. He said something happened to her over the past month or two, that she changed politically. He suggested her constituents wouldn't be happy. He even hinted that people were already calling him wanting to primary challenge her. Now, in politics, that is not just criticism. That is a political execution. That is the president telling the base, she is out. Don't support her. Find someone else. And Washington insiders were stunned, not just by the severity, but by the speed. 1 week she is a trusted ally appearing at rallies with him. The next week she is being called a traitor on Truth Social to millions of followers. So what could possibly cause such a dramatic falling out in such a short time? The answer isn't about personality, though ego definitely played a role. The answer is about a choice that was forced on both of them by something bigger than either one. A congressional vote that Trump very much did not want to see happen, and a vote that Marjorie Taylor Greene was determined to support no matter what. That vote was about the Epstein Files. Now here is where this gets uncomfortable for everyone, and I need you to stay with me because most people turn away right here. Jeffrey Epstein. I know some of you just tensed up. Good. You should. Because what happened with those files isn't just about one criminal. It is about power, secrecy, and whether our system protects the powerful at the expense of victims. And that question just blew up the Republican Party from the inside. Let me explain what was happening beneath the surface using systems thinking. Over the past several months, there has been growing pressure from some members of Congress and from the public to compel the Department of Justice to release additional documents related to Jeffrey Epstein. Epstein was a wealthy financier convicted of crimes involving underage girls. He died in jail under controversial circumstances, and ever since, there has been a cloud of questions about who else was involved, who knew what, and why so much of the story has remained hidden. Some lawmakers, including Marjorie Taylor Greene, believed full transparency was overdue. They argued that survivors deserved answers. They argued that powerful people shouldn't be shielded just because of wealth or connections. They pushed for a vote forcing the DOJ to release more records. Trump took a completely different view. He argued this was a distraction. He said, Republicans should focus on issues that move voters: affordability, inflation, immigration, the economy. He felt Democrats were using the Epstein story as a political weapon to pull attention away from his administration's successes. He called the whole effort a hoax, not because he was denying Epstein's crimes, but because he believed the way it was being framed was designed to trap him and his party. And here is the uncomfortable part. Trump's name does appear in some of the released documents. Not because he is accused of wrongdoing, reporters and officials have been clear about that, but because he was part of the same social and business circles in New York and Florida, where Epstein operated. Trump says he cut ties with Epstein long ago, and there is evidence supporting that, but the fact that his name keeps coming up makes the topic uncomfortable for him. It keeps the focus on something he'd rather leave in the past. Now let's go back to first principles. What is Trump actually optimizing for? He is in his second term. He can't run again. His power now isn't about what he can do for himself. It is about what he can do to the party, what he can do for the movement. And right now, heading into the back half of his presidency, he is trying to do something very specific. He is trying to reposition his administration's message around issues that actually move voters, not the issues that get the most media attention, not the issues that generate the most outrage on social media, but the issues that determine whether people feel better or worse about their lives. Affordability, the cost of groceries, gas, housing, healthcare, whether your paycheck goes as far as it used to, whether you can retire comfortably, or whether you are worried about running out of money. According to every poll, every focus group, every town hall, these are what matter most to Americans, especially seniors, especially working families, especially people living paycheck to paycheck. Trump knows this. His team knows this. They've been working to make sure every speech, every policy announcement, every media appearance reinforces one simple message. We're making your life more affordable. We're bringing costs down. We're putting Americans first. But here is the problem from his perspective. Every day that the news cycle is dominated by Epstein, by old emails, by questions about who knew what and when, that is a day the message doesn't get through. That is a day where instead of talking about inflation or immigration or jobs, Trump is answering questions about parties he attended in the 1990s, about people he used to know, about documents that may or may not contain anything new. From his point of view, it is a trap, a distraction designed by political opponents to keep him on defense, to keep him talking about the past instead of the future. And when members of his own party, people he supported, people he elevated, join in pushing that narrative forward, it feels like they're working against him, whether they mean to or not. Marjorie Taylor Greene saw it completely differently. She didn't see a distraction. She saw an opportunity, maybe even a moral obligation. She met with Epstein survivors. She heard their stories. She learned about the decades they spent waiting for justice, waiting for someone in power to take them seriously. And she made a decision. She was going to support that vote, and she wasn't going to back down, no matter who asked her to. So you had two people, both deeply invested in the MAGA movement, both committed to conservative principles, but now pulling in completely opposite directions. Trump wanted the party to move on, to stay focused on his broader agenda. Greene wanted to use her platform to fight for transparency and accountability, even if that meant going against the president's wishes. And when those two motivations collided, things got personal fast. One of the things that seemed to bother Trump most wasn't just that she disagreed, it was how public she made that disagreement. During a network interview, Greene talked about how she'd reached out to Trump privately, how she'd tried to explain her position, how she believed survivors deserved to be heard. Then, and this is the part that reportedly really upset Trump, she posted screenshots of private text messages between her and the president. Now, in Trump's world, loyalty is everything. It is the currency that matters most. And part of loyalty in his view is keeping private conversations private. When she made those messages public, it felt like a betrayal. It felt like she was using their relationship for political leverage or media attention. And that, more than almost anything else, crossed a line for him. Greene said she did it to show she had tried to engage respectfully, that she wasn't just going rogue. But she also said something else that added another layer. She said that after Trump's attacks went public, She started receiving serious threats, and she believed his words, especially calling her a traitor, were fueling that hostility. She said it wasn't just about politics anymore. It was about her safety. So now you had two people who both felt wronged. Trump felt betrayed by someone he'd supported and elevated. Greene felt abandoned and endangered by someone she had defended for years, both reacting emotionally, publicly, without much interest in backing down. But here is the thing. If this were just about two strong personalities clashing, it would be a footnote. What makes this moment significant is what it reveals about the bigger system, because beneath all the personal drama, something structural was happening. The Republican Party started showing cracks in a way that hasn't happened during Trump's entire political career. For nearly a decade, Donald Trump has been the single most powerful figure in the Republican Party. His endorsement could make or break a candidate. His approval could determine whether a policy moved forward. His base was fiercely loyal, and that loyalty extended to the people around him. If you were with Trump, you were safe. If you crossed him, you were out. But this time, when Trump made it clear he didn't want the Epstein Files vote to go forward, something unusual happened. The vote went forward anyway. And it wasn't close. The House passed it with near unanimous Republican support. Only one Republican voted against it. That means dozens and dozens of lawmakers, many of whom owe their careers to Trump's endorsement, voted against his explicit wishes. Think about that. From a systems perspective, that is not supposed to happen, not in the Trump-era Republican Party. But it did, and that tells you something fundamental about power dynamics. When you are in your second term and can't run again, your power isn't infinite anymore. It is not about what you can do for people. It is about what you can do to them. You can still destroy careers. You can still end political futures. But you can't create new leverage. You can't offer future benefits. And the moment lawmakers figure that out, the moment they realize Trump has more to lose than they do, that is when the power dynamic inverts. That is when people start making independent calculations about their own political futures, instead of just following orders. And I think that is exactly what we're watching happen in real time. Some analysts are calling this the beginning of a lame duck phase, a period where Trump's influence starts to wane because he won't be on the ballot again. Lawmakers are starting to think about their own legacies, their own constituencies, their own political futures beyond Trump. Marjorie Taylor Greene's shift is part of that pattern, whether she is positioning herself for a future presidential run, or whether she is genuinely following her conscience on this issue, or whether it is some combination of both. The fact is she is willing to publicly break with Trump in a way that would have been unthinkable just a year ago. And then there is the tone she has been using lately. In interviews over the past few days, Greene has done something surprising. She has apologized. Not for supporting the Epstein Files release, she is standing firm on that, but for the way she has conducted herself in the past. She has talked about wanting to end toxic politics. She said she regrets some of the harsh language she has used over the years. She has even said she wants people to be kinder to each other, to find a new path forward. Now, if you know anything about Marjorie Taylor Greene's political brand, you know this is a massive shift. She built her career on being combative, on calling out her enemies, on never backing down. So why the change? Some people think it is genuine. Maybe the experience of meeting Epstein survivors, of hearing their stories, of realizing the human cost of secrecy and power, maybe that changed her. Maybe it made her rethink her approach. Others think it is strategic. If she is planning to run for higher office, governor, senator, maybe even president, she needs to broaden her appeal beyond the hardcore base. She needs to show she can be thoughtful, empathetic, capable of growth. Either way, the transformation adds complexity, because now it is not just Trump versus Greene. It is Trump versus a version of Greene who is signaling she might be evolving past the role he created for her. And that is threatening to any leader who is used to total control. Now let me tell you about the moment that crystallized the break. During one interview, Greene was asked why Trump was fighting so hard to stop the release of these files. And she didn't just say, "I don't know," or "you'd have to ask him." She raised a question. She asked out loud whether there might be pressure coming from somewhere else, whether a foreign government might be involved, and she posted an image referencing donations from a pro-Israel lobbying group. She later clarified she wasn't making accusations, just asking questions, reflecting the confusion people were feeling. But the damage was done, because in today's media environment, once you hint at foreign influence or hidden pressure, it takes on a life of its own. Trump's team pushed back hard. They said it was baseless, irresponsible, frankly insulting. Some commentators said Greene had crossed a line, dabbling in conspiracy theories. Others said she was just asking uncomfortable questions about power and influence that journalists should be asking. But here is what is undeniable. That moment crystallized the break. It wasn't just about policy anymore. It wasn't just about strategy. It was about trust. And once trust is broken, especially in public, especially in politics, it is almost impossible to put back together. Now, here's what I find genuinely interesting. And this is where the engineering analysis reveals something most people missed. When reporters went to Greene's district in Georgia and asked voters what they thought, the responses were striking. People said they want to know the truth. They said they didn't understand why everything was so secretive. They said if powerful people did wrong things, those things should come to light, no matter who it embarrasses. One voter put it simply, release them and be done with it because it is going to be a fight to the end on this one. Another said, I don't know who they're trying to protect. That is all I want to know. This is important because it reveals a feedback loop failure. Trump thought he understood what his base wanted. Focus on the economy, ignore distractions. But what he missed is that his base is also deeply skeptical of institutions, deeply hungry for accountability, and deeply convinced that elites have been getting away with things for too long. Those two impulses don't always align. Sometimes pursuing transparency creates distractions. Sometimes staying on message feels like a cover-up. And when those tensions surface, they pull the party in opposite directions. Greene, whether intentionally or not, tapped into that second impulse. And the fact that so many voters in her district, Trump voters, solid red Republican voters, supported her on this tells you the demand for transparency isn't just a fringe issue. It crosses traditional political lines. So let me step back and show you the full system view of what this moment actually means. First, it signals that Trump's influence, while still enormous, is no longer absolute. For years, the assumption in Washington was that if Trump wanted something, Republicans would fall in line. That is no longer a safe assumption. Lawmakers are starting to make independent calculations about their own legacies, their own constituencies, their own political futures. That doesn't mean Trump is powerless, but it does mean the dynamic is shifting. Second, it reveals a deeper fault line within the MAGA movement itself. Is MAGA about loyalty to Trump? Or is it about a set of principles that can exist independently of him? Is it about winning elections by staying focused on popular issues? Or is it about fighting for accountability and transparency, even when it is politically risky? These aren't easy questions, and different people within the movement have different answers. Third, it shows how quickly personal relationships can fracture in politics when tested by genuine disagreements. Just weeks ago, Trump and Greene were on the same team, appearing at rallies together. Now they're calling each other traitors on social media. That kind of whiplash is jarring. But it is also revealing about how thin the bonds of political loyalty can be. And fourth, it highlights something that often gets lost in political combat. The voices of people who've been harmed, who've been waiting for justice, who just want someone to listen. The survivors of Epstein's abuse didn't create this fight. They didn't ask to be pawns in a power struggle. But their stories, their pain, their demand for accountability, that is what started all of this. And that might be the most important part. If you are someone who has watched politics for a long time, you know these kinds of moments don't come along every day. Most political fights are predictable, scripted, forgettable. But every once in a while, something happens that feels different, something that makes you pay attention, not because of the drama, but because of what it reveals about deeper currents. This is one of those moments, because what we're watching isn't just a personal feud. It is the first major stress test of whether the Republican Party can function as a coherent entity when Trump's power starts to decline. It is a question about whether loyalty to a person matters more than loyalty to principles. It is a test of whether transparency and accountability can coexist with political strategy. Where does it go from here? Honestly, I don't know. Trump and Greene could reconcile. Stranger things have happened. She could apologize, he could accept, they could move forward as allies. Or the rift could deepen. She could become a vocal critic, maybe even a challenger, or they could just drift apart, each focused on their own priorities, their own paths. What seems clear is that something fundamental has shifted. The old rules, the assumption that loyalty to Trump was the only thing that mattered, the idea that the MAGA movement spoke with one voice, the belief that internal disagreements would always be smoothed over behind closed doors. Those rules don't seem to apply anymore. So here's my final question, and I want you to really think about this before you answer in the comments. If you had to choose between a leader who demands loyalty above all else, who expects you to follow even when you disagree, who punishes dissent, who controls the narrative, versus a leader who breaks loyalty to stand for what they believe is right, even if it destroys their political career and endangers their safety, which one do you actually want? Because that is not a hypothetical question anymore. That is the choice the Republican Party is making right now in real time. That is the choice voters will make in the 2026 midterms. And that is the choice that will determine whether this movement survives as a unified force or fractures into competing factions. Most people think they know the answer, but when the moment comes, when it is your representative, your senator, your political movement making that choice, I wonder if you'll feel the same way. Here is what I believe. Reality doesn't care about party loyalty. Physics doesn't care about political strategy. Systems break down when they stop processing feedback from the real world. And right now, the Republican Party is getting feedback it doesn't want to hear, that transparency matters to the base, that loyalty has limits, that even Trump's power isn't infinite. The question is whether the party adapts to that feedback or ignores it. Because in engineering, when you ignore feedback loops, the system eventually fails catastrophically. And in politics, I suspect the same principle applies. Most people watching this story saw a Twitter fight. Very few understood what it actually meant. Very few recognized the deeper currents beneath the surface. Until now. Because now you've seen the full picture. You've seen the motivations on both sides. You've seen the strategic calculations, the emotional wounds, the power dynamics. You've seen how a fight over document releases turned into a fight over loyalty, over the soul of a movement, over the future of a party. Drop your answer to that question below. And if this analysis made you see the story differently than every other breakdown you've watched, hit subscribe, because we're going to keep tracking exactly where this goes. The truth is never comfortable, but reality doesn't wait for anyone to figure it out. And neither should you.